welcome to Art Pop Talk. I'm Gianna.
And I'm Bianca.
How you doing, Queen?
I am good. I actually just got back from New York City. I was able to go up there for the weekend and hang out with my best friend who moved up there in July for her job. And some super exciting news, you guys are going to be hearing from Dr. Green probably come November. She's going to come down and we're going to record an episode all about animal art. And I was able to go to the Met Cloisters for the first time.
How was it? Tell us.
It was cool. So it was nice because really nobody was there. We had, our reservation for the ticketed time, but even when we got there, the people taking our temperatures and things like that were like, oh yeah, like we're not worried about your time slot because it's hardly busy out here. I did not know that the Cloisters had the Maraude altarpiece.
Oh, it does.
So yeah, I was able to look at that. It was a great time.
I don't know if I like that word, cloister.
I don't know that I love the word cloister either, but it was very beautiful. Really, a really nice park next to it. It was a lovely day.
Well, good. I'm glad that one of us got to see the light of day during this pandemic. So
yeah.
Thanks for taking one for the team.
Oh, and anytime, anything for you.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
And the art Pop-Tarts, I'm just here to serve.
Of course.
Gianna, I also needed to quickly say that I also watched the Stacey Abrams All In documentary on Amazon Prime. And I just need everyone to watch it. So this is just a PSA this week. Everyone's homework is to watch the All In documentary on Amazon Prime.
Bianca.
Yes.
I also have some very special announcements to make today. You all will be thrilled to know that I have gotten off of Robert Pattinson TikTok and have gotten on to the clearly superior Harrison Ford TikTok.
Girl. I'm very jealous because my TikTok right now is Robert Pattinson. Well, Harry Styles, which is not going away. I will never get off Harry Styles TikTok. Still a little bit of Draco Malfoy TikTok, but I feel as though Harrison is very much on its way.
Yeah, let me tell you, it's a whole new world over here. Please come join me.
We just need to make a bunch of Harrison Ford TikToks.
Yeah, I think so. Just start talking into my phone at night. Harrison Ford, audiobook.
I would like Harrison Ford on my TikTok.
That was honestly probably the highlight of my week.
I love it.
Other than that, new season of Great British Baking Show is on with all the cuties.
Oh my God, I'm so excited to watch.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you watch the show, you'll notice that none of the dynamics are changed because of COVID, because they preface the show that all of the contestants have gone into a quarantine beforehand and they are going to be living on campus together.
Yeah, that's very fascinating. I wonder when they're going to practice because, they say oh, I went home this week and I practiced a lot.
Right. So I think they're all cohabitating together in quarantine and are having to. But I wonder if maybe we'll get some behind the scenes of them practicing together.
I would love that.
I think that'd be cute. But the first episode was really good. They all made portrait cakes and they were all hot mess. It was fantastic.
I'm so excited.
And also I started watching Nurse Ratched and
dude, yes, I have one episode left.
Yes, it's so good. Also on Nurse Ratched TikTok and Sarah Paulson TikTok always.
Actually, today I was very much on Sarah Paulson TikTok and I'm not mad about it, but it definitely fits into my bi lesbian TikTok.
Oh, of course. Because
so I'm, that's...
If you're not on gay TikTok, I don't know what you're doing. But there's also new episodes of The Good Place, which I know you started watching.
I did. I also started watching. I'm like 3 episodes into The Good Place. It's the final season. So I'm very excited. And Ted Danson, I just adore him. He just makes my heart full of joy. And that's all I can ask for.
Yeah. As much as I'm so excited about all these things, Bianca, the wait is almost over because Schitt's Creek will be coming to Netflix, the last season, October 7th.
Gosh, wow, so many good things to look forward to.
I know, because after
October
the Emmys,
7th.
Obviously just seeing all the Schitt's Creek content, we knew what was going to happen and yada yada yada, but I feel like I still don't want spoilers for it, and I've been trying to avoid it.
Yeah. I don't have spoilers. I think I know the direction that it's headed, I guess, but I'm very excited.
I'm so excited. So October 7th, mark your calendars.
Because we could totally do a Schitt's Creek recap.
Oh yeah.
Well, Gianna, do we have any art news this week?
Well, we do have some art news, or as I like to call it, Gaga news.
Lady Gaga corner? Is art news?
Is art news. So this was released a little bit ago, so you all have probably seen this, but according to a Deadline article, Lady Gaga will take on the role of Patrizia Gucci in the Ridley Scott directed film based on the rise and fall of the Gucci family, and builds up to or is centered around Patrizia, who was tried and convicted for plotting the murder of Guccio Gucci's grandson, who ended up owning all the family shares and then losing those shares and the company in the 90s. So this will mark Gaga's first acting project since her, of course, Academy Award nominated role as Ally in A Star Is Born. In the article that I found from W Magazine suggests that the part will, probably won't give Gaga a chance to break out into a musical number, unfortunately. But if done in the right manner, it may offer up some very, very, very high camp and dramatic moments, which obviously she's a perfect fit for.
Of course. I have a few thoughts. Can I?
Oh, tell me your thoughts.
Okay, well, first of all, even if she doesn't have any musical numbers, Lady Gaga in her season of American Horror Story was iconic in the glam and the looks for Horror Story Hotel. And I feel as though I will get that from Gucci because it's going to be so glamorized. However, I have one controversial thought that just prepare yourself. I'm a little nervous for.
Serve it.
I do not like Ridley Scott. And I read today that I didn't know the film was being directed by Ridley Scott. And I feel a slight bit of discomfort with that.
I was hoping we would talk about this, yes.
But we have Lady Gaga alongside Adam Driver.
Yes.
So what's the balance here? Because if Ridley Scott ruins this, I'm going to be livid.
Okay, here's the thing, though, is that it's pretty much confirmed that Gaga will be playing Patrizia, but other actors lined up that it's just kind of supposed, I think, at the moment. I have yet to find an article that has, staked their claim that these actors will be in it, but we have hearings that Adam Driver, Jared Leto, Al Pacino, Robert De Niro, Jack Hudson, who I don't know if I know who that is, and Reeve Carney.
I don't know who that is either.
So they are all in talks of joining the MGM production. So it should be
Adam
interesting.
Driver? Adam Driver is not Italian, is he? Because I feel like we're getting with Gaga, and we have a little Italian cast going on. But I don't know if Adam Driver is Italian. I'm fine with it either way.
But I am fine with it, but that's funny because I literally tried to Google it today. Like, my Google search history is Adam Driver Italian, and I found nothing.
Stop.
Yeah. But I do have to say, I mean, Adam Driver and Lady Gaga. I fully think that if these two perfect humans coexist in the same space,
can you imagine the TikToks?
No,
the TikToks.
No.
My gay ass TikTok is not going to be able to handle Lady Gaga and Adam Driver.
No, have you?
It will implode.
I just can't. So, Bianca, exactly. Like, I just fully believe that if they're in the room together long enough, like, everything as we know it will literally cease to exist.
Dost thou comprehend? Will cease to exist. Speaking of, in like 10 days, I can also watch Hocus Pocus.
You can.
Which is great.
Yep. 'Tis the season. So other than the little bit of reading I've done lately, you know, about the Gucci family and the Gucci murder, also trying to find out if Adam Driver is Italian, you know, I don't really know much about other than what I've researched as of late. But you know, we've got to bring Jewel on for another fashion and tea episode because you all love the Chanel episode so much.
Yes, a Gucci episode would be so good with Giuliana.
No, Gucci with the Martucci's.
Oh, whoa, hold on. You said that, and I'm envisioning us at the Met Gala. Gucci Martucci's.
Bianca, though, I hope you know that I envision myself at the Met Gala every day.
Right, but this was just, like, very solidified to me. Like, okay. That was, like, obviously... How can that not happen?
I have yet to find out, like, where is the line for you when you think, like, my claims are ridiculous and totally unattainable to where they are attainable? I have yet to find the line.
Harrison Ford now it's like a year and a half. I'm just going to say I don't see that. I see us Gucci for the Martucci's happening first.
Okay. Whatever, bitch. I don't know why you don't want us to meet Harrison Ford, but that's on you.
I just feel as though the progression to that point, the timeline is happening different in my head. Because I feel like to be taken seriously by Harrison Ford, like, he takes no shit from anyone, and I feel like we really need to be at a good point to even, like, manage having a conversation with Harrison Ford. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like we need to practice at the Met Gala. Like, you know, that would be a good practice point. Yeah, that would be good. That would be good lead in.
What was that thought you just had? I know the art pop tots can't see your face right now, but you just had, like, a light bulb moment.
No, I'm just thinking, you know, Audrey and Gianna know this about me very well, but I tend to do this thing where I have a timeline of my life, and I'll be like, okay, so tomorrow I'm going to New York City, and then when I'm on 5th, I'm clearly going to bump into Harry Styles, and then here's how it's going to happen, and here's how Harry Styles and I are going to get together, and I'm going to act so cool, and Harry Styles will obviously have no choice but to ask me out. And then, okay, Harry Styles is involved with the Met Gala, so obviously I'll be his date to the Met Gala, and then maybe there I can be introduced to someone at Gucci, and then next year we can have Gucci and the Martucci's, and then the following year we will clearly be in a place to know Harrison Ford and ask him to read our book.
Okay, yeah, that sounds logical to me. I love that.
So from that, are we ready to get into some Affinity Artists?
Seems like a logical transition.
Totally logical. Gianna, do you want to tell us what we're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, so in our 5th episode, we mostly talked about my experiences in the BFA program and talked a little bit about my work. So for today's Art Pop Talk, we are going to dive into my work and my interests a bit more today, and then discuss some artists I have researched in relation to my sculptural practice, as their work, while all very visually different, comes from a perspective of representing a truthful depiction of female bodies in art and speaking about different bodily or cultural traumas or the impact that systemic traumas can have on the body, which is all the foundation of my work.
Yeah, I'm super excited for you to share this. It's really interesting for me to think about because a lot of my research, and I think, well, I don't want to speak for every art historian out there, but generally I focus on the relationship between the artist, the object, and the larger impact that their work has. So it's not too often that I actually study how artists themselves find inspiration and how artists think about objects differently than maybe I do.
Yeah, that in itself, I also think is one of the fundamental differences between our thought processes.
Yeah.
Because as a maker, especially in the feminist genre, it is really critical for me to know what work and artists have come before me so I can either expand on conversations already have and or actively play into this larger history.
Yeah, I can't wait for the day when like two podcasters are going to ask you to come on their show and talk about your work and the larger history that it fits into, or your retrospective at MoMA, or like the show that you're in with Kiki, and like it's
And you said that my goal of having Harrison Ford narrate our audiobook was out of reach, but here I am having a retrospective at the MoMA. Okay. Who's unrealistic now?
I can't believe he said that because literally yesterday I think I was at the store, or like I was out for a walk or something, and I was literally like in 2 years Harrison Ford will be narrating my fucking audiobook.
That's what gets me through the day. I'm telling you. Like,
for some reason, I just think it's more realistic that you'll get a show at MoMA rather than in 2 years. Harrison Ford is narrating our book.
I don't know, man. Who knows?
Maybe Harrison Ford will come to your MoMA show.
Oh, okay. Two dreams colliding.
Wow. And that's when we'll ask him to do the book.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes more sense.
Do you see it? Yeah. I
Yes, because we have to meet him in a super, like casual way. It's gotta be natural, right?
Totally.
We don't really want to like force this on him, but we want it to come up super naturally.
Right.
So hopefully he won't listen to the podcast right off the bat.
Should we tell the Pop-Tarts about the goal that we had on our goal sheet that I highlighted in purple?
Go for it.
So we started having APT staff meetings, and so at our last staff meeting, Gianna and I were talking with Audrey, and we have a goal sheet for the podcast and where we want to be and what we want to work on next. And at the bottom of the Google Doc is just highlighted in purple, like the end goal, and it says, get the squad to move to New York and purchase a recording studio. But I think after that, that means Gianna's show at MoMA. Harrison Ford records audiobook. I'll add it to the goal sheet.
Okay, yeah. And by that time, I'm sure, you'll be curating there as well. So it'll be a shoo-in for me.
Oh my God, totally.
Favoritism in the art world, isn't a thing.
You can only succeed if you have connections.
Yeah, LOL. That's it's too close.
We're fucked.
Oh my God. Okay, guys, let's get into it. So this body of work of mine is called my Consumed series, and this was my capstone concentration right before I graduated in May. I believe that I have said this before, but the main takeaway from my concentration is that I strive to create works that address contemporary female conditions and its relationship to our patriarchal and consumerist culture. I do this by using an intersectional feminist lens. We love to see it, which, if you have stayed with us from the beginning, y'all know that this is a concept or thought process that affirms identity-based discrimination, both socially and politically. reading my artist statement that I worked to develop, all through my concentration, it grew with me as my body of work grew. When dealing with consumerist ideologies today, women drive 70 to 80% of all consumer purchasing. By utilizing what our society calls feminine merchandise, I call attention to the devastating consumption of products such as those associated with feminine hygiene. These products are not only taxed, as a lot of us know and deal with all the time, but also full of toxic chemicals, which we also deal with all the time. And breaking down this idea of feminine merchandise further, on average, women use 12 products per day, which translates to the exposure of around 168 chemicals. So within each sculpture, I employ products such as menstruation devices or beauty tools that commonly contain things like parabens, carcinogens, or phthalates to illustrate the operations of a commercial consumerist society as it is working to further perpetuate gender inequalities. And again, this is through its direct implications on the female body.
Yeah. We've talked about this a little bit in the episode we did on your work, but I wonder what it's going to look like monitoring any changes in these numbers. I wonder if people are using the same amount of products during COVID. Gianna, you and I were just talking about this before we started recording, because I certainly feel like I'm using less products, but then when I return to using products, I feel weird, like putting on makeup again is kind of weird or causes a breakout or whatever. But I'll be interested to see how over the years these numbers change and how your work may evolve to incorporate that.
Which they absolutely will change, and hopefully for the better. But yeah, that's a great point, because it also brings up what we've talked about on the show, but art is a record and a documentation of a moment or experience in that time. So I would absolutely want the work to change. If it's not changing, something is
and it's
up.
Also an environmental issue. Like I hope that as we all consider the effects of climate change and how consumption impacts the environment, those numbers will also change, and the products we use will change.
Right. And our consumer habits and consumerism in general in our country is very much dictated by the female buyer. Women drive the market because they're the ones doing the majority of the purchasing, whether it's for the home or for themselves. So research is a really, really critical part of my work, because I'm inundated with that information. And in order to have that accurate record of what is happening, I have to know, I have to stay up to date on what has been changing and fluctuating within the market.
We should take an environmental feminist class.
Yeah, I miss classes.
I do too.
All right, so getting into my process of creation, I start by collecting ready-made or found objects. So this could be anything from, casting tampons, birth control packets, other makeup devices, so on and so forth. Incorporating through the process of casting, as I said, it is here where I begin to pair the body with both medical and commercial products that are placed in a manner that gives the sculpture and the body decorative aspects. Then I go through a different method of casting to make the mold of the model's body, and then I create the positive, which is my final piece. As I said before, mold making can be kind of trippy, so bear with me through this. I didn't originally begin carving into my figure pieces or drastically manipulating the body in the beginning. I was just really taking that cast, putting it on a wall, and just kind of putting these products just laid on top of the body. It wasn't till my third piece where I really was pushed by my wonderful sculpture professor, amazing, to try and explore other kinds of manipulations. But body casting, is really, really cool. I was taught how to do this by David Phelps, who I've mentioned before, and he has helped me through several of my casting projects. It's really, really complicated to do by yourself. Having another set of hands is really essential in trying to do this.
Absolutely.
Honestly, it would be really fun to have him on to talk about casting. If you're all interested in learning more about that process.
Yeah.
And casting is a lot like printmaking, where even when you're doing it, you don't know how it's happening, and it's just like mind-blowing.
You're a wizard, Harry.
Well. I'm laughing at my note here that just says, "You're a wizard, Harry."
I like that you typed it in parentheses and then
I know.
it. It's like an affirmation to yourself. Like when you're casting, I think you just need like, "I'm a wizard, Harry."
I'm a wizard, Harry. Because I know that you all probably don't think I'm funny, but I think I'm hilarious. And I highlight my jokes so I know that they're just like LOLing for me while I'm writing my notes. So judge me.
No, I love it. Oh my God. We should totally do an episode on the evolution of casting. And I think we were talking about this with some family recently, but we should talk about that standard like casting graphic with just like the standing man. It's like
the standing man in contrapposto.
Yes. And then it has like the little layers of the elements that they're sculpting with, and then normally in an intro class you also watch a little video on it. But it would be great to do an interview with David, and we should do like a beer chat with him.
Oh yeah. And also just the fundamental principles of casting and the processes over the years has stayed the same, but also evolved in just how we're doing it, and kind of also what people are doing, what role for it. Because that video that you're talking about with metal casting, a lot of times now artists will make their molds, they'll sculpt it out of wax or whatever, and then they'll ship their pieces off to a foundry or some other place to actually do that metal pouring.
Right. Well, that's also a fascinating part of sculpture, like you said a second ago, with the amount of hands that you actually need help with in order to produce this work. Like that comes into artist studios and or putting it off to a foundry, who is like questions of the creator and what that type of market looks like and how much that costs and ownership of the piece. It's very interesting.
It is. And, it's amazing. It really is mind-blowing to me how much David does on his own. He's just incredible. So, but anyways, moving forward. So each sculpture of mine features a very ornamental design that functions to cause feelings of unease or possible discomfort when the viewer is able to process the visual and conceptual connection of this idea that I'm trying to create of body and product as one. So the word ornamental here is really important because the representation of women is conflicting, as they are not always presented in art as the subject, but instead used as the object. Or the feminine, in speaking in constructed terms, is used for aesthetic purposes. Getting back to the bodies themselves when acknowledging the restrictive nature and reduction of the body to, for example, let's say the torso or just the lower half. Each sculpture becomes an act of purposeful and conscious objectification. But again, if you guys go back and listen to episode 5 or prior episodes, as I have mentioned in the past, when you are making or taking a body and turning it into art, that is objectification regardless of the theme.
Right.
So if you're going to use the body, I think we all just need to understand the reality of that first.
Right.
So to challenge this notion and to further invite my viewers into the body of work, each sculpture becomes individualized through, unique surface treatments based on the invasive or harmful consequences that I'm trying to create, which can result from a variety of feminine products. Accomplished through both recognizable and distorted objects, portions of the body are manipulated to strengthen the truth that consumer products are currently and directly affecting the health and well-being of women. So I like to have some products kind of clear, you know, other packaging might not be as readable, but I am really, it's important to me to also empower the viewer so they're able, this ambiguity also allows for personal reflection, like, oh, I've seen that kind of compact looking thing before. I might have something like that. So yeah, I think that ambiguity is really helpful for me to help my viewers practice that self-reflection. Yeah. So this reality is further exposed through, again, this distinctive carving that I'm making that are reflective of a number of invasive or compromised factors, such as cancerous cells on a very macro scale, or surgical scars, or even pain receptors. Also, one of the constant materials I use is hemp. And it first started as a purely functional use, and then through some guidance and kind of working with David and several professors, I was able to see other capabilities of the material, and I began to use the hemp as a very visual tool to communicate a variety of different meanings, whether that's the idea of decay or, you know, deterioration, or to represent some kind of bodily fluid or substance and help perpetuate thoughts of destruction or trauma. So hemp is really used to just reinforce the positive cast that you have. So it was purely structural. Right. And then after I did that first cast with you, Bianca, actually, you know, having these frayed edges on the body. Yeah. They just looked really interesting, and, you know, we just kind of went from there, and then I expanded on it like crazy.
Well, I even love the color and the texture that the hemp produces. It's actually so much smoother, too, than I thought it was going to be. Like, when we finished and you peeled off that layer of the plaster and the hemp was revealed, it was so cool to see how actually like quite polished it was, even though it's this very like fibrous and natural substance. That was really cool to see. And yeah, I think it gives your bodies that kind of I don't know, like tissuous or like a membrane. Like yeah, like it feels like something, because it comes from nature, that's very like lively and
right.
Yeah.
The bodies themselves, because they're very statuesque and they're very still, but having that extra layer of dimension in the skin,
yeah,
I think helps a lot.
Yeah, totally. I am kind of going back to that idea of objectification. I'm just wondering if that has like come up in any critiques that you've had, or if people have asked you about that in your work, because I think sometimes when objectification seems less problematic, or it's not done in necessarily like an intentionally like malicious way, or it's done like with conscious intent, or it's done by a woman, like women can't objectify or whatever, like I feel like it's less discussed. So I'm just wondering if people have asked you about that.
Mostly professors. You know, when I first did my body casting of you, Bianca, and you know, I only do the middle section of your body. I chop it off at your legs and your arms, and I don't have your head in it, because to me these aren't portraits, right. You know. They're representations of women's bodies, but they're not portraits. So when I came in with this like body cast, you know, and I had this idea.
I'm just picturing you like lugging around my torso.
Oh my God. I had just like bodies everywhere.
What's in your flex
and,
kit?
What's in your flex kit?
Headless body.
Women's bodies. And you know what's funny is I would sometimes refer to them as he and like he, him pronouns. I don't know why. My professor would be like, "Oh, like, would you mind, or where's this one?" I'd be like, "Oh yeah, like, that guy's over there. Like, this one's over here." I don't know why. I'm like, something's wrong with me. I don't know why. For some reason, it's like objects to me. Sometimes I use like masculine pronouns.
So interesting.
Anyways, but mostly with my professors, and I came in and, my professor was like, okay, like, that you're reducing the body to specifically also like reproductive parts. So like, you're aware of that, like what you're doing. I'm like, very, very much. Thank you. Which was good to point out. Like, I just want to make sure we're on the same page. We're very much on the same page. Critiques for me in college posed challenges, until my, maybe like junior year is where, I started to really like find my voice and become a lot more outspoken. And I've always had an interest in feminist theory from the beginning. And, the minute I entered college, I started taking gender and women's studies classes, which helped fuel so much of my research. Critiques pose challenges for me because this is not something people generally want to talk about. And they are afraid to talk to me about my work because, I am outspoken. I was outspoken in critiques. I can speak eloquently about my work and defend myself, but I also praise, constructive criticism and critiques. So having one-on-one sessions with professors was where I got that most. I didn't always get the help that I needed from other students. Not to fault them in any way. It's just that it can be an uncomfortable thing for people to talk about. And I think feminism in general, people don't want to sound ignorant, which my goal was always to create a space in which people can freely talk to me about these subjects. As an advocate, I feel like that's just what I want to be as a human.
Right.
But in a classroom setting, I hope that I tried to do that. But, if you say something, a question, or you ask me something, I can also defend myself and talk about those things. And I like to be challenged, and I also want to challenge others. And some students could find that intimidating. So when it came to this idea of objectification, that was mostly discussed with professors.
Yeah.
So in total, this kind of representation is used to directly address the commodified, the normalized, and the problematic use of women's bodies shown within the commercial world, and also used to think about how individuals born with this anatomy function in both artworks and our current contemporary culture. My end goal in having my, my 5 sculptures displayed together is to create this layered experience for the viewer through the use of common materials and consistent feminist iconography. In utilizing a combination of different products to create visual interests, they simultaneously also evoke a broader conversation about female consumption. They aid in, I hope they do, aid in stimulating conversation.
Yeah.
That's really my number one goal at the end of the day, and function to spread knowledge in order to break this continuation of discrimination within the market. Ultimately, the body is used for several different purposes, but above all, it has served as my direct method of communication between myself and the viewer, as I am asking them and employing them to reflect on their own consumer habits.
Yeah, this is really interesting. And as I'm like listening to you, I'm kind of thinking about this problem where, in an effort to appear more feminist, women have problems questioning other women because we're so intent on supporting other women, supporting other people. And so I'm just thinking about how important it is for you to actually have people look and question your work as well as their own habits, and it's about learning and growing and not staying so static. So that's why it is important to offer those critiques, to offer questions, and engage in conversation so much.
Right. And, sorry, but
No, yeah.
like as we say all the time, but I'm definitely not excused from that conversation. I am also part of the issue, and I'm also part of the solution. So it's also about checking myself at the same time.
Yeah.
We're all in this together, and
Right.
both women and men and people of other genders are all part of this conversation that is affecting this issue.
And being a feminist doesn't mean not questioning things, right? In fact, it's the opposite. We should question and learn from everything. So let's talk about some of those artists who have really influenced your work. I know in episode 5, I believe I mentioned Kiki Smith, and I just see so much of her work in yours. And we've also, talked about our engagement with the Kiki show at OSUMA. But has she been someone that's really important to you?
Ha ha ha. Yes. Kiki has been a big one for me, which everyone who knows me is probably just laughing in their minds right now. Like, oh my God, Gianna, like, we fucking know. Like, we get it. You love Kiki. But the aspects of Kiki Smith's work in which I have always found most intriguing is her ability to create juxtaposition between the confrontational and the beautiful, which, side note, which I also have literally written in my notes, is if any of the art Pop-Tarts have started an APT drinking game yet, please take a shot every time we say juxtaposition, because that is like the greatest art BS word that we both love and hate to hear. So just lock that away for future use.
Kinetic energy.
Kinetic energy drink.
I love, I am so guilty of using the word juxtaposition, but I also love when I was a TA, all of the times juxtaposition was used in like an in-class writing session.
Or, oh my gosh, Audrey needs to tell the story of her watercolor critiques where she was so close to graduation and she just could not anymore. So she started writing little like poems and like lyrics or something about just how like awful this was. And she's like, the word juxtaposition like makes me want to die. Okay, going back to Kiki. This tension in her work is one that I find myself referring back to often, as I believe, it has really helped me to address my lived experiences as a woman. For example, human anatomy holds a continuous presence in Kiki's prints and sculptural work. Whether she presents us with the human digestive organs or a woman giving birth, the body is always displayed in its purest and natural form, for the most part. Sometimes she does elaborate with female figures and puts them into fairy tales or also spiritual environments as well. Although I am taking the body and giving it other extremities, whether it's visually not in its natural form, but in a state of trauma, I find her work powerful and have found myself interested in the idea of showing the beauty found within the human form without idealizing the body. In my sculptural practice, by first utilizing Kiki's perspective of capturing the natural operations of the female body, or those born with this internal and external anatomy, I also am clearly not idealizing the body, but instead manipulating it in a manner that brings female objectification to the surface and contrast the body with these unnatural decorations to invite the viewer to think about our gendered system or culture. But that foundation of first taking the body as it is the underlying foundation for my work.
Yeah, I think when I look at your work and Kiki's, like I said, I see the relation and the inspiration she gives you, but yours feels like a bit more tangible to me, and maybe tangible isn't the right word, but your work is very like direct. Like it's very in your face. And maybe it's because I worked on Kiki's paperworks before, even though I know she does sculptural works with other materials. But the Kiki Smith and paper show we did, her work feels very like ephemeral and mystical, where yours feels very grounded. But it's interesting because essentially you both address women's health, mental and physical, but to see your work in a more linear manner than Kiki's.
Yeah, which is a great point. I mean, Kiki, that show was called The Body, the Muse, and the Spirit, and she is a fascinating woman. She trained as a EMT, so she has such knowledge of, you know, medical histories of the body. So she's interested in like the pure function of our anatomy, but also to this day, I don't believe she is a practicing Catholic, but she grew up as Catholic. And so she talks about spirituality in her work, and that's her perspective and her lived experience as a, you know, as a female artist. So it just goes to show how lived experiences in your own personal history is going to impact that point of view so much, which is why our point of views are so different at the same time.
Yeah, well, she deals so much with, in the show particularly, we looked at Alice from Alice in Wonderland and Little Red Riding Hood, and she often relies, in addition to her religious experiences, folklore and women of literature, with that combination on contemporary women's issues, as well as her own experience, obviously, but it's a play on these stories that depict that kind of childlike character we're familiar with, which like feels strangely darker and more ethereal than your work. So who is next on your list of Affinity Artists?
Ooh, the Miss Nandipha Mntambo. She is freaking amazing, you guys.
And stunning. Can we just talk about how stunning she is?
I can't.
Like,
because
I just
I'm
look at her
cry.
and I go.
She is on another level, let me tell you. And I will tell you. So
And I will do it right now.
And I will do it right now. Nandipha Mntambo is a South African artist. She is freaking incredible. Her work is chilling, powerful, impactful, and just important. She defines her work as existing between several worlds, which refuses to be located by one particular identity. So in her work, she uses her own body quite often, sometimes for the sake of portraiture and sometimes not. She changes the ways the body and her own form are both sometimes absent and present in the work, making it difficult for the viewer to pinpoint, you know, constructed identity markers. She also further plays with our own preconceived or systemic ideas of gender and identity by splicing her body with mythological figures, Shakespearean figures, you know, and just through her own imagination. For example, the Minotaur is a character that I have found to appear in several of her works and has also taken shape in different mediums, in photography and in sculpture. I should also point out that the artists that I'm talking about today, there'll be 3 of them. I'm referring to mostly their sculptural work, but all these artists are interdisciplinary artists, meaning their practice does not exist in just one medium or material. So specifically in her bronze sculpture of the Minotaur, Mntambo reflects on the self and its endless incarcerations by inserting herself in the role of this mythological Minotaur. The artist states, "I take on another identity. I get in and out of my skin, combining my traits with the ones of the character I am impersonating. It is an open-ended process, and a third figure emerges that is not men nor the original character, but rather an entity that borrows elements from both, and in doing so acquires its own profile." So in this case, the bronze figure is a woman who's imposing this strong stance. In my research, it has been referred to as a warrior-like stance that is contradicted by luxurious or soft elements such as the fur or the gentle gaze seen through the eyes. The ambiguous figure expresses femininity that is fighting to break through the ominous and intimidating exterior, while also symbolizing the last moments of the life of the Minotaur. In mythology, I believe it's Theseus that slays the Minotaur in the labyrinth, and its death can be seen as symbolizing the fear of the unknown, but at the same time, the story goes, the Minotaur is relieved to be rid of its lonely existence. So in the sculpture, Mntambo uses the motif of the Minotaur and her own portrait to act as a metaphor for narratives of violence and sexuality that is linked to a historical understanding of masculinity, power, and post-colonial identity in order to speak about race and gender. So speaking about post-colonial identity, this is also really essential in understanding the breadth of Mntambo's work as a whole. To dive into that concept, I'm going to lead us into a different installation of work of hers called Mirror Image. To describe this work, imagine two people on their hands and knees next to each other and then lay a sheet over their backs. You don't see the actual body, but the sheets take on a new shape by showing us the outer edge of the human form. So in this work, Nandipha uses cowhide to cast over her own body by staying in that submissive-like position until the hide is settled and keeping its manipulated shape. And I believe she dips the hide in resin, and that's how the shape is formed. This process becomes an essential part of her work, as the absence of self results in disturbingly haunted imagery and material. I love it, right? That only preserves the memory and the form of her body. Through her own cultural experiences in South African history, she dives into the existing effects of apartheid trauma, the policy or law which enforced legal racial segregation from a white majority government from 1948 up until 1999. In using both sculptural and performative methods of casting her body, Mntambo politicizes herself through a method of absent self-portraiture, which in effect evokes both personal and cultural struggles in the hopes to heal a post-colonial South African history that has impacted her identity as a Black woman and is still affecting the country today. So by casting hide over her own body, we share a commonality in that both our sculptural processes become an essential part of our work, as the absence of self preserves the memory or the form of the body. I'm connected to Mntambo's work as we also similarly employ our own personal perspective while uncovering cultural traumas and truths from a female perspective. Also, we similarly and clearly are using the female body as a platform for our chosen method of communication between us and the viewer in order to, evoke not only our personal struggles, but also talk about this larger cultural struggle that has directly affected us, the people around us, and the places which we are from.
It's so cool to hear about your affinity artists because much like Kiki, Mntambo's work is also looking to those mythological figures, like you talked about the Minotaur. So I'm kind of curious why you seem to be gravitating towards artists that are inspired by folklore, mythology, religion, and storytelling when you haven't really addressed those themes much in your work. Your figures don't necessarily represent a single figure or story. Like you said, they're, it's not one woman, but it's kind of the greater population of women or people impacted by consumption. So I'm just, do you have a desire to kind of play with any types of these stories and mythology?
Not directly, but what I find fascinating about that is the state of transformation or transfiguration which exists in both Mntambo's work and in Kiki's worth. And I think that transfiguration, or that state of transforming, is something that I have with the bodies as they are overcome by these products. You know, because what I'm essentially creating is not an actual physical representation of, you know, how women look with all these products on their body, but is a hyper realistic understanding of what is happening and what is might be happening in the future. You know, we've talked about post-human bodies and how they're operating and functioning. But for Mntambo, she also has another piece, and it's her interpretation of Ophelia, a character in William Shakespeare's Hamlet.
I love that name,
and
too, Ophelia.
So the artist places herself in the role of this tragic protagonist, and it's the moment after she has thrown herself in the brook and has drowned. So the figure looks submerged in this contained bath, but upon further investigation, it could be her own tomb or resting place. And it's this symbol of innocence gone mad, and holistically contributes to themes such as life, death, birth, and regeneration, which we also see in many other feminist work, or those who depict, study, and speak about the female body both spiritually and anatomically, such as Kiki Smith. So, you know, in this piece, it could be her resting place, but it's very peaceful at the same time. So not only do we have a state of transfiguration as she is putting her own body into this story and making herself the protagonist, but we also have the state of transformation, because is she coming out of the water? Is she in the water? Is this a renewal, or is this her place of rest? And it's just kind of this happy accident almost that some of the artists that I've looked at have referred to these stories. But it's not perhaps as accidental as we think, because if you study these stories and, you know, understand what is happening, these female characters are playing a certain role, and they're there for a reason, which is why feminist theorists and artists have been, you know, so intrigued by them.
I mean, Ophelia is a character that obviously comes from literature, but we've seen depictions of her by male artists. Is it the Waterhouse Ophelia?
The Waterhouse.
Oh, God, stunning. Yeah. But to think about Ophelia, Alice, Red Riding Hood, the Minotaur, like the transformation that these characters have had from depictions by men and male artists, and what the origins of the story, like what perspective those female characters originated from, and then to see how artists like Mntambo and Kiki are manipulating those stories to tell not necessarily like a more truthful depiction of women in these stories, but to, I think, give them a little bit more depth and reevaluate how we think about these passed down stories and legends, and particularly female characters within that.
Right, and also include them in the narrative, I think, is the most important goal, because it means a great deal for Mntambo to put her own body in that role of Ophelia as a Black woman, as in art history, that documentation of Ophelia, you're going to see a white woman.
Right. Or, I mean, even like Ophelia, I mean, her character is obviously meant to be tragic, but how many tragic women die and are meant to die because it's just tragic? Like, what is, like, what are the repercussions of that?
I think that's when we have those idea that both artists use, Kiki and Mntambo, where again we're taking it to an extra level, incorporating not just death but also this idea of regeneration.
Yeah. So the next artist you're going to talk about is incredible. I'm obsessed. You might know her from some fairly recent installations she just had on the facade of the Met building.
Still emphasizing the female body yet again. Wangechi Mutu. She is a Kenyan American artist, and her work is compiled of sculpture, film, and performance that works to deconstruct gender, to again speak about cultural trauma and question one's own image. Her female forms, although abstracted, expose discrimination and focus on constructed ideas of femininity and sexuality. Playing and experimenting with tactile and sculptural techniques, Mutu employs a combination of grotesque and delicate elements to create contrast and develop the structure of the images, signify issues of representation, and create hope for a developing society. By reshaping traditional methods of expression, her work serves as an act of reclamation, and her process functions as a healing method, an act of survival to uncover the trauma and truth of Western fascination with the other. So starting with her sculpture Tree Woman, the figure is posed with a thrust out hip and stiletto heel, covered in vines that seem to sprout from and encage her body, creating a contrast between her primitive nature and runway pose with heels. The site specificity of her materials, such as the natural pigments from the soil and the wood used to shape the figure, are purposeful in order to suggest displacement with African culture. So these materials, also, if I'm not mistaken, were taken from Kenya.
Wow.
And then they were used to create this sculpture. So it's site specific. So these materials are really important.
Sure.
And the more that I study sculpture and the more that I make sculpture, even though we're not seeing this sculpture take form, we have to know that the process and the materials really mean something in these contemporary works.
Yeah.
The trauma and effects of human displacement have resulted in an exotic fantasy that was both produced and resulted from the violence that Westerners have created. This piece continues to critique the Western fascination with the other, specifically in the context of the misrepresentation of Black women.
Wow. Yeah, I had no idea about the material. That's just fascinating. So these pieces are much more physically abstracted than Mntambo's, and I think maybe Mutu's work reminds me more of Kiki's because we have this kind of dismemberment of the female body, but they do run in that vein of the spiritual and the mythological, and I think Mutu's manipulation of the body has a surrealist element to it for me.
And this is a really great piece to reflect on when thinking about our early conversation in my work about that purposeful objectification, right? She's purposefully making this misrepresentation of Black women in order to make her point. So objectification within art can be so extremely powerful. Yeah. And that's where it becomes that act of reclamation for me. And I think in this work, this is what you designed through discrimination and through your own fascination. So then I should get to claim ownership of that. And I'm going to show you what you created. This last piece that we're going to talk about is very similar visually to also a piece that Kiki did, which I'm going to see if you probably know which one it is, but I'm going to test you. Ooh. Ooh. So our last piece is one of my favorites because, I love to see when we are clearly and actively challenging and critiquing revered artists and calling out the faults in art history.
It's one of my favorite things
to see it. Ending with Mutu's piece called Second Dreamer. It is modeled after the modernist sculptor Brancusi's, Bianca, you're going to have to say this title.
La Muse Endormie.
La Muse Endormie.
Bleu, 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 bleu.
Je m'appelle Claude. So Brancusi's piece translated in English means the sleeping muse. So this piece by Brancusi was also created in 1910. Brancusi, right, is studied as this pioneer of modernism, but like many pioneering male artists before us, and before Mutu's contemporary work, I know, shocking, pulls heavily from primitivism and cultivating African masks. His piece, which was part of a series I think of 6 pieces, and it's representational of a woman's head done in bronze, commentating on this broad landscape of sculpture and how many other modernist artists have profited off of primitivism. Mutu's sculpture, Second Dreamer, directly appropriates Brancusi's stylized lines, but instead of using a physically representational form, she replaces the subject by creating her own bronze head, this time with features of an African woman, also done in bronze. So the dreamer's neck in Mutu's piece is also significantly more prominent than in Brancusi's sculpture, as the absence of the body and severed neck become now a focal point instead of a hidden attribute, as it is also additionally placed on a thick wooden chopping block. So lastly, this piece claims ownership of African American representation by again appropriating this modernist style and by using also a mythological reference of Medusa, a powerful female Gorgon beheaded by heroic masculinity.
Ooh.
So
Ooh.
A lot of layers in this piece, another good reference, mythological reference. I love a good appropriated artwork.
Totally.
You know. So to kind of end this discussion for today, thank you all for making it to the end. It's been a lot of my voice today, so thank you for staying with me. You know, Mutu, as well as Nandipha and Kiki, and many others I have studied and used for inspiration, highlights the fluidity and constructed nature of social norms, how that stemmed from the way our bodies operate, how we are born into these bodies, and how stories, histories, and everyday practices can be harmful to our own body and also impact, you know, the world around you and around us. For me, those habits exist within the oppression created by consumerism and in the consumer world. For these artists, we use similar and different lenses, from using anatomy, mythology, spirituality, and history, each time bringing a new, different perspective and reality of the individual, the culture, and the social traumas and aggressions that happen every single day.
Wow. Gianna, thank you so much. This was awesome.
Well, anytime.
I'm excited too to see what you do next and what type of artists you'll be looking for or looking to with your next body of work. So this is awesome. Body of work.
Yeah. Body of work. Ha ha ha.
Work of bodies.
Good one.
Good one. Okay. Well, I think that about wraps it up for today. Thank you guys so much. You can listen to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and YouTube. And with that, I think we will talk to you on Tuesday.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.